Hello, welcome back. What were we talking about, Belinda?
We're talking about justice.
We were talking about justice, and last time we were talking about divine justice, weren't we?
Yes.
And as a brief recap, we mentioned that a lot of people are concerned and are somewhat anxious about the end, what happens at the end of life, and because scores aren't always settled and justice doesn't seem to be done within the span of a mortal life, then most religious traditions have a means of reckoning. They see the soul as eternal to begin with, and therefore what hasn't been completed or where justice hasn't been done in one's earthly life, there is a chance for judgment, for justice, for reparation, correction after one's death. And this is where the anxiety arises, because people can wonder whether they will end up in a good place or in a bad place. Whether there is a good place or a bad place.
Yes.
Yeah. And most believers, most people on the planet are adherents of one religious tradition or another, we mentioned. Therefore, they believe in some kind of justice which extends beyond the bounds of this mortal life, that our 70 years and 10 or our 100 years or however many years we're given here are but the blink of an eye compared to the eternal destiny of the human soul. Yes?
It's funny, isn't it? We feel like this life goes forever, but it doesn't. It's a blink of an eye.
Yes.
You're right.
And I think most people on
It's
the
like
planet
a dream.
Believe that there's more to our existence than just this mortal life. And
Absolutely.
that's why we were considering divine justice, and we were considering different theorists about theodicy. How does God's justice work when we can look around us and see suffering and apparent injustice in this world?
A lot of it.
And we talked about different schools of thought: Calvinism, Arminianism, Molinism, Universalism. And that's where we got to last time. And maybe we should, unless there are some questions about that, maybe we should bring it back down to earth a little bit, because justice issues come up all the time. From families where there are little kids saying, oh, you gave so-and-so something and you didn't give it to me, that's not fair, right through to what we do to serious criminals, whether we implement capital punishment. Do we believe in punishment, punitive justice, or do we believe more in corrective and restorative justice?
Those without sin cast the first stone.
That's a good saying.
It is, isn't it? Yeah. I don't think we are entitled to take any life.
Well, out of that same scriptural context comes the statement, "Judge ye not, lest ye be judged," which is a clear dictum about judgment, our human capacity to judge and how it should be used. Now, there's no question that we human beings are making discriminations all the time. It's part of having the intellectual equipment that we have. We are meant to exercise right judgment, and it's impossible to go through human life and not exercise the capacity of judgment. So what do we make of a statement like that? Judge ye not, lest ye be judged. Well, to begin with, I suppose, the kind of judgment that's being referred to there is an expressed condemnation of another person whose behaviour or words may be incomprehensible to you. And implicit in that judgment is the sense of inequality as well, because we think, oh, I would never do something like that. So in some subtle sense, we take the moral high ground and we judge the other person for doing something that is absolutely out of line, beyond the ken, not something that we would do. And it provides a basis for demonising them, seeing them as subhuman in some kind of way. So,
but they reckon that if given the similar circumstances, we may do the same thing. We don't know.
Well, we may do the same thing. So, yeah, that having that awareness can temper one's tendency to make condemnatory judgments of other people. There's also the question of forgiveness. Does it stand in the way of forgiveness? Because certainly people tread on our toes, do things to offend us all the time. And from the same tradition, we are taught to seek forgiveness of the Creator as we forgive our neighbour. What are we forgiving our neighbour for? We're forgiving them for trespasses against us, for things done that have offended us. Now, a lot of this has to do with perception, because remember, not everything that offends us need to have offended us. Maybe it pokes a wound that we've carried for a long time. Maybe it triggers us because of some trauma in the past. Maybe the person didn't mean anything harmful by it, but we can still take offence. And often in that offended state, we pronounce judgment on the other person. So judgment is happening, the sort of judgment that this scriptural injunction warns us about, the scriptural admonition, is taking place in an unforgiving frame of mind. It's not letting the hurt go. It's not rising above taking offence. And it doesn't possess the awareness that we can't put our relationship right with the Creator and re-enter the flow of life, re-enter the Tao, if you like, as long as we are holding something against our neighbour. So if we choose to hold the grievance and express the judgment, because they tend to go together, then the admonition is, judge ye not lest you be judged. And the flip side of the corollary of that is, if you are judging another, be prepared to be judged. In other words, if you're going to dole it out, you need to be prepared to receive it. And as long as the sense of inequality persists, you're going to be doling out a judgment and receiving judgment in some shape or form. finding that the judgment that you receive is, again, beyond the pale, outrageous, unjust in your own eyes, deserving of retaliation or punishment. And so we get into a vicious circle of offence and retaliation. The retaliation leads to offence, which leads to more retaliation, because there's no forgiveness and there's no consciousness of equality. Where there's forgiveness, one sees the need to let go. Where there's equality, one understands what you were saying, Belinda, that if you were circumstanced in the way that person was, you'd probably have the same judgments and the same expressions, really.
Well, a person gets to a certain point where they commit an injustice after years and years and years of abuse and all kinds of different things. It changes you, it alters you as a person. You've got to take all of that into account.
That's definitely...
What kind of injustices have they felt?
Yes, we don't know everybody's history.
Yeah, maybe they've felt a great deal of injustice.
Yeah.
You have to look into it.
Yes. And another sense of inequality is not understanding that as they hold their judgment of you, you hold your judgment of them. And the judgments will feed each other, and it will escalate into a total breakdown of relationship. And then there'll be conflict of some kind. And there might be breaks in the conflict. There may be truces in the conflict, but that's not the same thing as peace, because peace
never lasts.
Isn't the gap between two outbursts of conflict, is it?
No.
It can never last because there's nothing positive that has entered that picture by way of understanding your neighbour and understanding the Creator. Now, the great injunction, love the Creator and love your neighbour, there are two aspects to this. With forgiveness, we're asked to release our neighbour from what we hold against them so that God can release us and there can be a restoration of relationship with the Creator. And that's essential, because if you put together everything that we've talked about, we are here with this capacity of free will, which we need to try to exercise diligently always to be in conformity with the divine will. This is the task of the human being. Not to use the will willfully, perversely against the Creator's will. And if one is holding forgiveness against a neighbour, and by neighbour I'm just trying to be as generic as possible, against your brothers and sisters, your spiritual brothers and sisters, fellow human beings, then one is blocking that potential possibility of realignment. So as we balance ourselves with others, we balance ourselves with the Creator. Now, forgiveness and reconciliation are different. What's the difference between the two? You've heard the two words.
Forgiveness and reconciliation. I think forgiveness is more thorough. Deeper.
Forgiveness is more thorough? Well, if I can release you of an offence you have made against me, that's forgiveness. And if I don't, and if I maintain a judgment, then I in turn should be prepared to be judged. And so the whole issue of justice is raised again here. Whether the judgment comes from the mouth of your interlocutor or it comes in some other way, there'll still be a judgment. So justice is balanced with mercy. These are two divine attributes which are also human attributes. They come from our Creator, and we are endowed with both justice and mercy. And some people think that they are necessarily opposed, that to have more justice, you need to have less mercy, or to have more mercy, you need to have less justice. But I believe that's a misconception. I believe that justice and mercy are mutually reinforcing, and they should be in harmony. And if they're not in harmony, then there's something about them that we have misconceived. We don't truly understand what justice and mercy are. When we forgive, we are practicing mercy. And when we withhold forgiveness, we are courting judgment. So it's a bit like, if you don't receive mercy, you'll receive judgment. So if there's something between me and another person, if I don't receive mercy from the Creator, I'll receive the Creator's judgment. And that'll happen if I'm not extending mercy to my fellow human being. But then I'll be receiving judgment. The Merchant of Venice, yes. The quality of mercy is not strained. So, do we want mercy or do we want judgment? But they are not two different things, and this can be somewhat paradoxical, ostensibly paradoxical, and difficult to understand. That when one of these is withheld, we get the other one. Now, forgiveness is just basically letting go of the offence. You're not holding it against the other. You're not holding a grievance against them. And so the Creator's not holding an offence against you. What offence is that? Well, there is an offence implicit against the Creator when we do not understand what our what our neighbour's issue is with us, what's triggered it, when we don't trust that we continue to be on the same team, as it were, that we're suddenly rendered enemies. There's something about the dynamic in the situation that we haven't understood, that God wants us to understand for our own benefit, for our own growth, and for the building up of humanity. So to dispose our minds and spirits such that we can be receptive to such an understanding is the way to go. That's forgiveness. Reconciliation is more of a ritual of coming together, because what if somebody that I'm in a conflict with is more diligent than myself and is doing the spiritual work better and forgives me, but I haven't forgiven them? then even if they've forgiven me, it's going to be hard for them to approach me, isn't it? And to give expressions to that forgiveness. Well, what does forgiveness look like to you? Does it look like this, waving a fist and pulling a face? Or is it more of the nature of a handshake, an embrace, and an acceptance of somebody's company and society? You've had the experience, obviously, Belinda, where you may have forgiven somebody for their offence against you, but they still are holding on to something. They haven't forgiven you.
Oh, yeah.
So that when you
many times
then try to get close to them and maybe resume your relationship, such as it was before the offence, it's well nigh impossible, because
so holding a grudge.
That's right. And so you get you get closer to that, and then they bristle, and it may trigger another round, and they may express more judgments, and they bring up what they're holding against you.
And it becomes a nightmare.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So in that case, reconciliation hasn't taken place.
No. I think it's the ego that stands in the way of that, probably, more than likely.
Are there things, it does, but there's ego on both sides, and are there things that we can do to promote reconciliation?
Try and be humble.
Yes, and how does that look? Because
non-judgmental.
there is a gap in understanding. The aggrieved person still feels that they either haven't been understood or haven't been heard, or there's something that needs to be done or restored.
Or you let that person know that you want to work on it. Let's get down to the real issues.
Well, let's say I, God forbid, kill somebody's child, and then I'm apprehended, tried under the criminal law, and I get my sentence. It may be a life imprisonment. It may be a capital punishment. And I've accepted that. And I don't blame both the victim's family nor general society for the hostility it has directed towards me. And then I have an opportunity to meet the parents of this child that I've killed.
Oh, that'd be awful.
Even though I have forgiven this, it might sound odd that as a murderer, forgiven, but yes, forgiven and understood and accept the punishment of society. If I approached then the parents, I'd probably get an icy reception, if not a hostile reception, if I ever were able to come into their presence. Why is that?
Because you took away something very precious.
And they're not prepared or ready, and maybe never will be ready, to reconcile with me.
Probably never be ready, Tom. You never get over something like that.
But sometimes it does happen. I know of a case where somebody driving under the influence killed children belonging to a particular family. And the family, of course, were totally devastated, but they're a family of deep faith, and they forgave the driver of the car. And he was profoundly sorry for what he had done, and he's in a prison cell. But the father of the dead children eventually came to him and they reconciled in the prison cell. And they became very, very close. And the prisoner well, I'm just saying that these things happen.
Because he didn't only take out one child, I think he took 3 out from the one family and a cousin.
Yeah, that's right.
As well.
These things do happen.
They were just going to get an ice cream.
That's right.
And the guy was drunk.
But what's remarkable is that there was a reconciliation between the offender and the family, the bereaving family, and of the bereaved family, and out of that reconciliation came a deep, authentic friendship and a commitment to work together.
So I don't understand this
to
deep
help.
friendship.
Yeah.
How could you?
I'm just reporting it. Now, this is one of many, many, many cases, an unlimited number of cases that have occurred over history where there's been reconciliation.
Yeah,
somebody tries.
Children.
Well, you've heard of attempted assassinations and things, and somebody's gone and forgive the person that tried to kill them.
That's different than having to bury 3 children.
It is. But the person is alive to be able to do it. But here's a father doing it on behalf of his own children who are now dead.
Shocking case scenario.
It's a shocking thing to have to deal with, but what's more remarkable is the reconciliation that came out of that. First the forgiveness, and then the reconciliation happened over time and was evidenced in expressions and actions. I mean, these men were able to warmly embrace. They were able to pray together, and they were able to work together to alleviate people with deep disturbances, especially prisoners with deep disturbances. So something good came out of the whole thing. So let's just sum up this segment that we've done. We've talked about the way we hurl around judgments, usually not right judgment. I'm talking about hostile condemnations of others. And judgment begets judgment. It's the corollary of judge ye not lest ye be judged. If you don't want to be judged, don't judge. Go straight to forgiveness if you can on receiving an offence.
Or unless you're sure, don't judge.
Unless you're sure, don't judge.
We just assume sometimes.
That's right. Sometimes
go with the most popular opinion.
Sometimes we do assume the worst, and there is a tendency in us human beings that we need to check, which is a kind of appetite for hearing the worst constructions placed on people, for lending an ear to malicious gossip, for wanting to know the worst about people rather than wanting to know the best. And
that's right.
Instead of protecting people's reputations, we often throw people under the bus for entertainment.
Oh, God.
Yeah. It's all part of the syndrome. So justice has always to be considered in relation to mercy, which means it is always to be considered in relation to forgiveness and a sense of equality. And as we reach a balancing point and equilibrium, the scales, the restoration, with our fellow human beings, we reach a balancing point with the Creator, where there's no need to fear a harsh judgment or divine justice turned against oneself.